Shirley Bassey is back for a third time, but she's singing so quietly she sounds like a mime. Naked ladies being flushed down the toilet. Was that a diamond butt plug, and did that lady fall on it? I think he's attempting re-entry, sir. Everything or Nothing sequel presents We Need to Talk About Moonraker. I'm Tom Stewart of Lonesome Muscle Productions, and with me is the man who has defied all my attempts to plan an amusing death for him, Michael Shantz of the How Dare You Awards. We're going around the world one more time discussing Bond films that could be considered continuing sequels with 1979's Moonraker, and to put you out of my misery and wrap up, another look at 2021 No Time to Die. As it is England's one indisputable contribution to Western civilization, I may have pressed myself to a cucumber sandwich and a few other trappings of afternoon tea, including Earl Grey hot, as that's what other British-French co-productions like Captain Picard drink in space, if not the tea-phobic Bond himself. What have you got to sup on there, Michael?
The vodka martini, shaken, not stirred. In the bucket.
So from a bucket, from a rocket-shaped bucket.
There you go.
I've tried to, obviously, I don't know how long this is going to last, but I tried to get a space-specific cup as well. So I got my I got a Luke Skywalker here, I got a Han Solo here, and if you flip this on around, you got yourself a stormtrooper. So.
It's certainly what inspired making this movie, so it's appropriate.
Yes. It is really, let's face it, the only reason this film exists.
Yeah.
Is the
much to your chagrin.
Much to my chagrin, and we will get there. I like how even with our choices of beverages, you've marked yourself as the hero, and I've marked myself as the villain of this particular podcast. Because
I thought the same thing.
Famously,
because I thought of tea and cucumber sandwiches, and I thought I don't have anything Drax to wear, so I wore the deep button.
Yeah, I mean, we're both wearing the more
fan shirt that he follows hot women into a cave with.
Yeah, he does. He likes the open shirt.
Yeah.
And
he's a fan.
Even when he's wearing the nighttime cat burglar look, he's got a very open, which I think the pale flesh emerging from the cat burglar suit sort of renders that disguise null and void.
Yeah, that was one thing I noticed about this movie, that James Bond, as played by Roger Moore, can't even walk into a room without the most attractive woman in the room turning her head and going,
That's right. Yeah, there's I don't know if this holds the record, but there's a lot more women, and they're a lot more interested in Bond than they ever are in any other film. Which I think is sort of interesting.
I need a writer like that.
You need Christopher Wood.
Yeah,
writing your autobiography. Well, here we are, our final Bond miniseries episode, the final episode of Everything or Nothing sequel, and this is a wrap up, a general wrap up of all the films we've done, but we're also catching up with Moonraker and No Time to Die, which are potentially the only other films left on the list that we might want to look at. And as always with these episodes, we pick a significant date in James Bond history on which to premiere the episode. And December 19th is when we're releasing it. And that's a very important date in James Bond history for both good and bad reasons. The good, well, depending on your point of view, is that the two Bond films were released on this day. One of them a Roger Moore Bond film, The Man with the Golden Gun, and one of them Pierce Brosnan's Tomorrow Never Dies. So I nearly said No Time to Die then. There's a lot of dies in the
plenty of dies.
plenty of dies, but it's Tomorrow Never Dies, which if not the like Moonraker, the Bond film that should never have happened, it's certainly the title that should never have happened, because of course the title was based on a publicist's misprint. It was in fact to be Tomorrow Never Lies, and it was just at the announcement it was misread, so they stuck with it.
That's fantastic. I'd never heard that story.
It explains pretty much everything you need to know about that, the care taken with that film.
Right.
But tragically, it is also the day on which Desmond Llewellyn, who plays Q in Moonraker and for the entirety of the 20th century, died in a car accident prior to the release of The World Is Not Enough, which was a posthumous performance that they a posthumous performance that they decided not to excise a scene from, in which he disappears into the ground, which is on that Halloween Donald Pleasance level of tastelessness, I feel.
Yeah. Yes.
So that's why we're releasing this on December 19th. And that's obviously where we're meant to release this episode, given what happened on this day.
It must be. And it's funny. I mean, speaking of Desmond Llewellyn and how important he is to the franchise, but in watching this movie and watching Moonraker, I thought it was fun because I took note that he looks fairly late in the game in Moonraker. So to know how long he stuck around after that, it's very impressive.
It's certainly, yeah. I mean, he's 2 more Bonds, 2.5 more, more Bond eras. He lasted. Of course, this is, on the flip side, this is Bernard Lee's last appearance as M. And we've seen the following film, For Your Eyes Only, where every character actor in Britain is screen testing to be the new M. Before they gave it to Robert Brown in the next movie, who I think it's somewhat retconned in No Time to Die that he was his own human. But I think up to this point, we just felt he was a recast Miles Matheson.
Yeah.
And that it was never said specifically that he and Bernard Lee were not the same person. Unless you believe that he's Admiral Hargreaves, who he plays in The Spy Who Loved Me. But even Bernard Lee, after this experience of filming Moonraker, just decided that's it.
I'm done.
I'm done with films and life. And that's kind of how I feel when the final credits roll as well. I
can't believe you hate this movie that much.
I mean, we'll talk about it in detail, but I mean, I've got my so bad it's good Bond film in A View to a Kill. Like I don't need a second one. And you know what? One of our talking points is I'm going to talk about some of the redeeming qualities of Moonraker.
All right then.
I'm sure you'll want to jump on that bandwagon because it's a movie I know you like more than I do.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about this. Moonraker, first of all, Roger Moore is the James Bond I grew up on.
Yeah.
And Moonraker is the first James Bond movie I ever saw in a theater.
I mean, 2 for 2.
Yeah.
I'm exactly the same. I mean,
and at that age, just even we'll get there when we talk about how much of this movie is not in outer space. But the parts that include lasers, when you're 7, 8 years old, you're just eating it up with a spoon. You love it.
Yeah.
Plus, it has Jaws, and you love Jaws.
Right. And yes, and funny you should mention that, because we're moving on now to continuity claims, which for Moonraker shouldn't take too long. Yours. Moving on. No, I do want to say a little more about this because I realized on this viewing how right we were. First of all, I mean, the impetus behind this episode was not to finish on a downer like Spectre, to at least have something fun to talk about, regardless of its quality. But I just interested how different ways in which Jaws is used in a sequel way.
Yeah, right.
So it takes Bond 3 goes to acknowledge that he's met Jaws before. I know if this is early onset dementia or what, but but the third time he meets Jaws in the film, he finally recognizes him and says to Lois Charles's Dr. Goodhead,
his name is Jaws.
His name is Jaws. He kills people.
Kills people.
we know each other, but not socially. So it's a little bit more than the henchman came back, but it could conceivably be in any sort of timeline.
Right.
He acknowledges that this is that Spy Who Loved Me happened. So it is technically a sequel. Also interesting that he's not the main henchman in this movie.
Yeah, right.
He's a surrogate henchman.
He's a surrogate. Yeah, I was just gonna say he's a surrogate henchman for someone who dies,
which I think is extraordinary that he is. I mean, it's
and Drax calls somebody on the phone as though it's Henchmen Are Us.
Yeah, he calls the henchman hotline, and he even has a line in which he says, "Well, if he's available, then yes.
That'll do."
So that's fascinating that he's a surrogate in his own movie,
right?
And he is, I can say with certainty, the only character in this film that has any kind of arc.
Yeah, absolutely.
The only character who changes and develops, not only from a henchman to an ally, but also from a psychopath to
a boyfriend.
To a
loving boyfriend,
the romantic lead of the film. So I think that's all worth mentioning, because when you break it down, and even though it doesn't feel like this when you're actually watching it, they've done quite a lot of character work on Jaws in this one film. Bearing in mind,
for that one character,
and he appears in less than half the film, so it's worth mentioning. That's as far as I go. The only other kind of half continuity claim I'll go for, but if this was just this on its own, I wouldn't call it a sequel. But the fact that it's there sort of adds to the feeling. General Gogol returns entirely unnecessarily,
right?
And he will, he's going to be the Rufus T. Firefly. Well, he outpaces Rufus T. Firefly by a good 3 or 4 films. He's going to be in the next everything up to Living Daylights. He will appear in every Bond film. And you can see that they're building towards that, because there's really no reason why he needs to be in this film. But just the way that they use him, like they're repeating a bit from Spy Who Loved Me, which is that he's a womanizer. He's a womanizer essentially. And he has it's him on the red phone, the hotline,
right?
But he's got one in his home as well as in his office, apparently. And that, he's basically sleeping with his secretary. So there's a little bit of a callback there. Like, I wouldn't call this a sequel on its own, because then you have to call everything until Living Daylights a sequel, which is not necessarily.
Right.
There's an acknowledge, like, he's still in that Spy Who Loved Me mold. So that's what I've got for Moonraker. That's why we're doing it.
I was gonna say, are we done?
Well, no, we're not, because we're also talking about No Time to Die, which is interesting to think of as a sequel. It's a Spectre Aftermath sequel. It picks up a storyline from that movie, particularly the imprisonment of Blofeld. A relationship established in that movie between Bond and Madeleine Swann. We've got a very rare instance of a Bond girl returning as the same character. Right. Which I can only think of one other instance of that in the whole canon. And obviously a returning villain, again played by the same actor, Christoph Waltz's Blofeld. And I guess the return of Spectre before they are killed off.
Summarily killed off.
But they are the second tier villains of this film. Mm-hmm. And also, you have to put this film. This is the culmination of the Daniel Craig Bond timeline. There's references to the narrative continuity of all previous 4 Daniel Craig films, although the degree to that varies. I think there's only 1 to 2 references to Skyfall.
Well, just having M there at all in Ralph Fiennes,
having the characters that were introduced in that film, I guess you could say. But you've got Judi Dench's Bulldog, which is seen, and also a reference is made to Moneypenny shooting Bond.
Yeah,
but that's the only 2 that are there. But mostly the references are to Spectre, but there is at least 1 reference to every single one of the films. So that's why No Time to Die is a sequel. But we're not going to talk about that just yet. We're going to open the conversation talking about Moonraker, and my first kind of talking point really is as we like to do with these films, especially because they have such prominent cold opens, set apart from the rest of the film. I want to talk a little bit about the cold open for this film.
Okay.
One of the defenses of Moonraker that I've heard is that actually all the problems are in the second half of the film, and that the first half's actually quite decent. And if you look at it, as a follow-up to Spy Who Loved Me, it's pretty good, and then it goes off the rails later on in the movie. And I just want to remind them, and I've heard that from trustworthy sources, that I just want to remind those people that this film begins with Bond achieving the power of flight, Jaws flapping his arms in midair to try to achieve the power of flight, and then falling into a circus tent. Okay, I just want to that's how the movie begins. So I don't want to hear any more about this strong first half of Moonraker.
Well, you'll be pleased to know that my note was, that's a wow of a dumb cold open.
Yeah. And the worst part of it is I think they think they're upping the ante on the opening of The Spy Who Loved Me.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, let's do something that somehow this is better than the guy skiing off a mountain, nearly impaling himself, and then releasing a parachute. They were like, well, what's more dangerous than that? No parachute.
No parachute.
Except what's wonderful about watching these in 4K is that you can see the parachute inside the stuntman's jacket.
Yeah.
His suit jacket, because he's just this bubble when he supposedly doesn't have a parachute. And that
was one of my other notes, where they're doing some pretty serious close-ups on faces that are clearly not the characters.
Which I don't know. Let's give them the benefit of the doubt that you wouldn't see that as clearly in 1979.
Maybe.
Mind you, it is a cinema screen, so
yeah, it's still a big screen.
TV movie.
I also, it was funny because James Bond is in this airplane.
Yeah.
And the pilot and the woman on the plane are saying, "Too bad for you," and shoot out the cockpit. Mm-hmm. And then there's a scuffle. Mm-hmm. And then out of nowhere on this small plane, Jaws appears.
Oh, that's true, yes.
And I keep thinking, where was he?
Where was he?
Where was this mammoth of a man hiding?
That's very true. I hadn't even considered that. You always find those extra implausibilities. You always find the deep layer.
Why is the father playing with a yo-yo in Halloween?
Takes me back to our discussion of Halloween Ends, and so sort of like this doesn't make sense. This scene in which Michael Myers gets,
in which people aren't seeing Michael Myers
recharged like Mario.
Yeah, he gets charged like he's the Energizer Bunny.
Right, but that's not your problem with that scene.
No,
in terms of plausibility.
No, well, it's my main problem. I just like extrapolate on all my other
As I
problems
said
as
before,
well.
it is charming. It is very charming. It speaks very well of you. So yeah, I think they think they're upping the ante on Spy Who Loved Me, which was, the stunt that saved the franchise. Bond films were on a downturn before that, and that one sequence was almost enough to sort of reverse the trend. What's something additional that's funny about this? We're all talking about the second half of the cold open. The first half of the cold open is, of course, the kidnapping of the Moonraker shuttle.
Sure.
From the back of a Concorde.
And I thought about this only having watched the movie this time, because I think the actual space shuttle started in 81, right? So this is pretty impressive that they.
Funnily enough, I didn't research any real facts in preparation for this. Carry on.
I just thought, good on you, Moonraker. You clearly at least knew what that thing was going to look like.
You're saying that this is prescient science fiction, is what you're saying?
Yeah.
Oh.
I'm going to give him a little credit. Because I know you won't.
No, I won't. And what I'll also say is this is Lewis Gilbert's third and final Bond film, and every single the other two being You Only Live Twice and The Spy Who Loved Me. And the front half of the cold opens for all his Bond films are exactly the same. It's the only difference is whether it's space or sea, but some kind of missile technology is getting stolen. Yes. So I think that's and I guess what I would say not defense, but this film better prepares you for the second half of this movie than anything else in the film, because having Bond fly in the cold open sets the science fiction fantasy tone that at some point we're going to have to deal with.
Yeah.
And I guess the ending on a button of Jaws falling into a circus tent, it tells us that this is going to be a very circus clownish kind of film as well.
Yeah, I mean, we'll get there when we get there, but there are moments that feel very Superman 3 inspired.
Yes. Well,
in terms of comedy.
Yes, yeah.
Or
Superman 3,
I guess because this came out before, it inspired Superman 3. Yeah.
You're gonna make me eat my words, aren't you?
Yeah.
Now that you brought in Superman 3. So that's just kind of all I have to say about the cold open.
Me too. Except I did notice when James Bond catches up to the pilot, he just puts his face right in his ass as he tackles him.
There's a lot of that in this.
That was fun. Also, does James Bond?
There's a lot of oral sex adjacent.
Yeah.
Physical comedy.
Does James Bond, as he's flying through the air, is there a moment, maybe I was taking a note, is there a moment where he takes out goggles and puts them on? Because clearly the stuntman is wearing goggles.
My guess would be no.
Okay.
Again, thank you for sweating the small stuff for us.
Yeah, that's what I'm here for.
If Moonraker were a person, I would describe their personality as easily influenced. Because here's a conservative list of the movies that are referenced in Moonraker: Star Wars, Close Encounters of the Third Kind,
yes,
The Magnificent Seven, Superman, 2001: A Space Odyssey, the entire Hammer horror cycle, and I'm sure there's more. And it really kind of struck me on this viewing that
it did for me too. Actually, I had forgotten about Close Encounters.
Well, that's the big one, because they had to license that from Spielberg himself.
That's incredible.
And I'll skip to the.
It's as though they were saying, "Don't worry, everyone, we're getting to space. Here's a teaser."
We'll be there in an hour.
Yeah.
Also, An hour or so.
Hour
Hour
10.
and 10. Hour and 10. We'll be there. How long will we be up there? Exactly half an hour, including the credits. Well, I'm gonna skip to what I have to say about Spielberg because it's a fascinating story. Spielberg approached Broccoli in the late 70s to direct a Bond movie.
Yeah.
Broccoli's response was, no, we've already got Lewis Gilbert on board. So we don't need your kind of cinematic talents.
Well, famously, the license plate that's taken out of the Tiger Shark says 007.
And it goes deeper. I think it goes deeper than that. Because, so, I mean,
which
first
I've
of all,
got somewhere here. I could show it
oh,
to
wow. Yeah, please
Yeah.
do. First of all, like to turn around to Steven Spielberg and say, we don't want you to direct a Bond movie, and then to make Moonraker directly influenced by his late 70s sci-fi movie.
Mhm.
I mean, it doesn't surprise me because I know Broccoli, but the audacity of that, and then to reject Spielberg and then say, but we really need that Close Encounters music from you, by which he negotiated a swap for the 007 theme, which he would then use in the Goonies, as that's why Data's music is the James Bond theme, because he traded it for the Close Encounters music in Moonraker.
It's great.
But obviously,
literally just watched Goonies 3 or 4 nights ago.
Of course you did.
Yeah.
But this film is directly influenced by the cinema of Lucas and Spielberg. Steven Spielberg wants to direct a Bond movie, but they won't let him. He then in response to him saying to George Lucas, I want to do a Bond movie, Lucas pitches him what he sees as Bond movie plus, which is Indiana Jones.
Yeah, Jones.
And that's how that came about. And then if you look at, obviously the Indiana Jones cycle has a number of James Bond film references, but I would say quite a few of them, especially in Temple of Doom, specifically Moonraker. So what a weird kind of cyclical relationship this
jumping out of airplanes without parachutes.
Exactly. I mean, that's whenever I see that sequence, I think Temple of Doom. Everything with the snakes in Rio in the rainforest.
Sure.
So, I mean, Temple of Doom is much more Bond heavy than I'd say any of the other.
Yeah.
But it's remarkable that it's not that Spielberg didn't get to direct a Bond film. He was influenced by them, Bond. And they were influenced by him.
Yeah.
Which is just sort of fascinating. It's kind of a cliche to talk about how the Bond films, they leech off whatever is popular at the time and they take whatever's in the zeitgeist and put them in the film. Parkour in Casino Royale, jumping in GoldenEye. But here it's specifically the movies of, the past 10 years and specifically the ones that are really popular at the moment. In a way I've never seen before or since in a Bond film. It is
because you would know, but wasn't there? I mean, there was another movie slated, right?
Yes.
For Your Eyes Only.
For Your Eyes Only, yeah. Well, more than slated, it appears in the end credits of The Spy Who Loved Me.
Yeah, there you go.
James Bond will return in For Your Eyes Only. The reaction to the success of Star Wars made them look at an unadapted Ian Fleming novel that had the word moon in it. Literally, I mean that's
as far as it went.
I'm not caricaturing it. This is real life.
I was also surprised to
see.
This
isn't science fiction. This is science fact. That's what you said about Moonraker.
Well, I was also surprised to see for a movie that was rushed out that it's over 2 hours long. That in scale, I mean, they're going to lots of different places,
Yeah, and there's another way in which you can see that that's exactly what would happen, because this film Moonraker feels more probably the most formulaic Bond movie. Like they're literally ticking all the boxes, one after the other on the list. They also, they're not using, surprisingly enough, they're not using the content of Moonraker, the novel. Right. So they don't have an original story, so they're pretty much remaking The Spy Who Loved Me with lasers. I mean, and again, no caricature here. This is what's going on. But also, I think that's where the sequel part of this comes in. I think that's why they go back to Jaws. They go back to Gogol. It's because they gotta crank this film out.
Sure.
And let's use familiar elements to get us, to pre-production of For Your Eyes Only. I really think that's a huge part of it.
Interesting.
But I see what you said. Like, why didn't they release like a Quantum of Solace style mini movie to plug the gap? But
yeah, right.
I think I guess it is a 90-minute Bond movie with a Star Wars style space sequence tacked onto the end.
Well,
which was what makes it 2 hours.
I also wanted to tell you, because I laughed out loud when I first started doing my kind of original research for the movie yesterday. Because I laughed when I saw that it is Oscar nominated.
In what area?
I was going to ask you what you think. Because you can't possibly think it's that song.
I'm gonna look at my redeeming qualities talking point. Music, set design, best supporting actor for Michael Lonsdale. Ken Adams, no.
It's the one that's gonna make you laugh the most, I think.
Like models?
Best visual effects.
Best visual effects. Rather than set design. Because the set design is flawless.
Yeah.
No, the visual effects are flawful. Wow. In 79, there was nothing. There was what else was? Did you have there? What else was nominated? I want to see what the.
Ooh, no. Okay. Here, let me.
Well, I'll talk a little bit about.
Yeah, let me do some research.
We talked a little bit. We mentioned they didn't use any of the book, the Moonraker, Ian Fleming's book, but the book also has an interesting relationship with cinema because they use some names. Hugo Drax is the villain of the book Moonraker and the film Moonraker. The mentions, there's a few nods as well. The RAF feature in the book and the film.
Okay.
Sir Frederick Gray mentions that he plays bridge with Drax, and that the bridge game in Moonraker is a huge set piece. But that's it. That's literally as far as it goes. And this is the kind of, I think, the first instance of where, The Spy Who Loved Me was literally they bought the title, not the story. But here they're actually adapting against the grain of the novel, because Cubby Broccoli rejected the idea of using any of the plot, which, for those of you who don't know, involves a nuclear missile that's being aimed at London. Because he said he didn't want to make a film about a piddling little rocket. So what we have here is that the source material is now being counteracted by the film adaptation, which is, I think, a big moment in Bond cinema. I don't know if they ever really came back from that.
I have an interesting update for you.
Okay, let's do it.
Moonraker. Previous talked about film on our watch alongs, Star Trek the Motion Picture.
I was gonna say it's got to be around that time, and that was also on the list.
It was, along with 1941, a famously panned movie,
right?
The Black Hole.
Okay.
And the winner, of course, Alien.
Okay. Well, justice was done, but I want to know who's on that nomination committee, because at least 3 of those titles have horrible visual effects.
But did we think so at the time?
I mean, I don't know. I was motion picture ever? Did I ever look good to anyone? I guess it did, but
I think so.
okay.
I don't think anybody
I just
saw
every
Star
time I
Trek
look
the
at it and
motion
go,
picture and thought shitty effects. Like they were worried about other stuff.
okay, fair enough. Well, that is fascinating. Anyway, to finish talking about literary adaptation, it's extra ironic that they ignored the substance of the book, because the book itself is based on a screenplay that Ian Fleming wrote. He was trying to make a British movie, and that's what the novel. So the novel originally started as a screenplay, and just to cap off again this weird cyclical relationship between Moonraker the book and Moonraker the film, the film itself was novelized by its screenwriter Christopher Wood. So there exists two Moonraker books, one written by Ian Fleming and one a novelization of the film. So
Okay.
Fascinating stuff. Yeah, we talked about, I mean, this is an unplanned Bond film, obviously.
Right.
I wanted to get a bit deeper into something that we try to talk about, women, and we already started a little bit. A lot more of them, a lot more dispensable.
Mm-hmm.
In this particular film. What is that about what you thought, or any other insights? Or
no, I would agree. I mean, you know, there are two Bond girls.
Yes.
One they let die via dog attack. It's a strangely directed moment.
It seems to have been directed by Terence Fisher. Guest directed Terence Fisher.
It's very ethereal, you know. This like
again, it's pure hammer horror. It's pure. It's such a weird pull at that particular moment. The music is also working towards that as well. So I don't think it's got to be intentional.
But we haven't connected with this person enough for it to matter as much as they're saying it does.
No.
That's
very true. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's an empty melodrama.
But Holly Goodhead, I mean, that's one of the all-time great names.
Yeah, I mean, it's one
up there with Pussy Galore.
Well,
not on that level, but like right below it.
Yeah, like oral sex is both visually and verbally referred to in this film. There's a point in which Bond falls into the lap of Lois Chiles. Which I don't think.
Excuse me. We're sorry. Pardon.
Which I don't think is a coincidence.
Yeah.
I guess the only interesting thing in a cultural sense about Dr. Holly Goodhead, is the kind of brushing up against the idea of a woman with power.
Well, and a woman, because Sally Ride is not happened yet. That's going to be in a few years. You know, so they're talking about things.
I thought you were talking about a Bond girl there for a second.
No.
Sally Ride.
Could be. Yeah.
I mean, in Britain, you're absolutely right on like the that's a great connection. The other one I was thinking of was what was going on in Britain at the time. Margaret Thatcher becomes prime minister a few months after this film's released. I think it's pretty much a foregone conclusion while they're making the film. She's already taken over the Conservative Party that she's going to be prime minister at some point. So there seems to be this grappling of the idea of a woman with power and influence. But
it's one of my notes because, you know, James Bond being James Bond walks into this estate. By the way, like what is going on in this state where everyone's trying to murder someone, but nobody says, hey, you're trying to murder me. Stop it. It's very strange. But he says he's looking for Dr. Goodhead. And she says, that's me. He goes, a woman?
I know. And every time I see this, I feel like, well, like what's the first? Well, I mean, we talked a little bit in On Her Majesty's Secret Service about making casting Diana Rigg as the Bond girl and focusing on her as an action heroine, kind of did feminism by the back door, if you'll excuse the pun. But I think it's Man with the Golden Gun was like the first time they talk about feminism, actively, which is several years ago, and so I feel like, and given that Britain's about to elect a prime minister, only a few years away from female astronauts, it's like this feels like the last gasp of the male establishment against this kind of thing.
Right?
It's sort of like it's a foregone conclusion that's happened. This is our one last chance to sort of say, well, isn't this a little bit uncivilized to have women?
Yeah, I mean, I might have been unfair in my. Yeah, I might have been a little unfair though in my characterization of James Bond.
No,
it's more, I think he sounds more surprised than disappointed.
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of
not that either are good.
Is the film kind of on his side by making her an agent? Well, I
also can't figure out what the hell she's doing, because she's like
she's there to
NASA astronaut private detective. Like, has NASA sent her there to figure some shit out?
But that's it, without anyone saying it. I think basically the backstory is she is, she has a doctorate. She works for NASA. The CIA recruited her to spy on Drax. I mean, that's how it kind of feels to me. None of this is addressed in the film.
Not ever.
It's just that she's CIA because she has some funny gadgets in her hotel room. That's it. Right. That's the only way we know she's CIA. So that's the only culturally interesting aspect of it. But otherwise, it's just a feeling of let's get as many women in this film as possible, and also dispatch with as many of them in as quickly as we can. Killing them, or having, I don't know what happens to the Brazilian woman.
Yeah,
it's just like I'm done, dude. We're done.
Bye.
Yeah. There's a lady in the Venice glass shop who's just like.
See, but I think that lady in the no, it wasn't the lady in the Venice glass shop. It was the woman giving the tour.
Yeah.
That we see later on the space station. And in the cave.
And yeah, no, I just, again, before we move on to anything else you wanted to talk about with Moonraker, like space, I do think this, like, I guess it's the worst day of fishing beats the best day of work. The worst Bond film, categorically for me, the worst Bond film, still has some redeeming qualities. John Barry's doing his own greatest hits album throughout the film, which is very enjoyable. I mean, he's not breaking new ground as he will in in View to a Kill and Living Daylights, but John Barry doing Bond music 101 is still enjoyable.
Agreed.
I think Michael Lonsdale is great as Drax. I think the ability to play that as a dry.
Having watched No Time to Die and this and Moonraker in close succession, there's a certain kind of James Bond villain, and give me Drax. Give me more Drax.
Just keep giving him the zingers. Delivered, completely without any emotion or care, and it's really good. It's really good, and it's a shame that the movie that surrounds him, because it's such a great villain performance. And then finally, just as Ken Adams' set designs are really the star of the show. Once again, like I don't know what happened.
I'm surprised that you hate this movie as much as you do, because it's got everything that a James Bond movie is supposed to have, and its faults are kind of delightful. Tell me about some of the delightful faults. Like the gondola that can turn into a car.
But doesn't that feel like a pale imitation of of this happening. Well, of the car, the underwater car in the last film. You know, it feels. I guess like I said, you know, I've got my so bad it's good Bond film
Mm-hmm.
that I find endlessly watchable. I just think this is a not very interesting take on the formula in such a way as to make it feel like formula. Like that, I mean, that is that's
I'll say that. I'll agree with you there. It does feel very formula.
And that's what
but not so much that it feels paint by numbers either, because it's too weird.
Well, it does have a pigeon doing a double take.
Yeah. Yes, but it's not a pigeon doing a double take. It's just the film rewinding and going.
Have you ever tried to get a pigeon to do a double take?
I agree with you.
I think it's a very elegant solution.
But that's why you don't do it.
That's why you don't do it. Yeah. And also, you know, consumptive Italian played by Alfie Bass, who's famous from the Ealing films. Yeah, I mean,
This movie gave me 3 band names.
Okay, let's hear them.
Well, only one of them I think is really good, but Python Fight.
Yeah.
The puffy helmets.
The puffy helmet.
And my favorite, Bamboo Attack.
Okay, yeah, I like that. Well,
most movies don't give you 3 band names. Let's face it.
That's true.
You can get like one great one, like Con Air's Gutter Bunny.
I mean, also, I mean, the stuff like it's always a matter. It's a matter of degree, not kind. Like, you know, the Bond films, people attack them because they're, you know, they think they're all the same, and you actually watch them, they're not all the same. They're all a take on a certain kind of formula, but more or less interesting. And this is the less interesting one, and it's the one where you know, every maneuver is done with the least possible care and attention to integrating it into the sense that you're watching some kind of a movie. I mean, for instance, product placement Hill.
7 Up, man.
But I mean, there's a it doesn't help that sequence is automatically goes into the Magnificent Seven horse riding sequence.
Right.
But I got this, you know, like that might be my only so bad it's good moment in the film, and I felt like this when I did for a movie that I really don't enjoy. I do have to say that I have done a live commentary in a movie theater of Moonraker. So and the only moment where, you know, I get that sort of A View to a Kill sublime terribleness is the moment when, you know, on product placement Hill, Bond is ejected from the ambulance, shakes himself down to the opening to the opening bars of the theme from the Magnificent Seven by Elmer Bernstein. At that point, I'm like, God, if the whole movie was like this, I might be on board. It's just like a collision of elements at that point that go so bad it's good. But
that's funny.
I think it is too sort of underperformed to be so bad it's good.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's my biggest beef with it, and it's the least interesting of the Roger Moore films, of any of the Bond films, I think. And it, you know,
yeah, that doesn't make it less fun to watch for me, though.
Well, I mean, there's got to be, you know, there's got to be something. I'm just not willing to give it a pass on any front, really.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think it's good because it's so bad. I think it is
right. Okay.
I think it's an abject failure that doesn't even have any compensatory pleasures in that. Compared to, say, A View to a Kill, which is an abject failure on what it's trying to do, but is extremely entertaining from start to finish.
I love A View to a Kill.
Yeah, no, I mean that would be my go-to. you know, I mean, I've used that film in the past at times when, you know, when I was studying, I was trying to, when I was writing my thesis at college, and, you know, I needed a break from writing, but I also needed to not use my brain cells. It was A View to a Kill was what I did. I watched it in like half-hour stages. And, you know, I just leave Moonraker faintly irritated. It doesn't have that same kind of capacity for me.
Oh,
But
not for me.
what's quite interesting is I think it speaks to the film itself that I've come up with a number of talking points for Moonraker, none of which are about space. so let's I'm going to improvise.
That's fine. That follows the model of the movie.
It's the model of the movie. But let's I don't want to, you know, I don't want you not to have to talk about space, or for people not to hear about it. What are your thoughts on space in this film? Last half hour only.
I am delighted by everything that we see in outer space.
Okay.
I was on this viewing when the American space shuttle shows up and the guys just start floating out and the lasers start. I was laughing out loud. I was having such a good time. And but even before that, James Bond and Goodhead just get on a shuttle and it's like they're in the driver's seat.
Yeah.
Now I realize that, you know, you're not launching it yourself and that she's a NASA pilot.
They're very specific about that, aren't they?
Yeah.
It's on a pre-planned flight. Because there's actually a moment in this film where Bond looks at Goodhead to say, how are we going to fly this into space? And she says, it's okay. It's on a but also the fact that I don't know why at that point she says, I am also a trained astronaut. Like, I don't know.
Right.
I feel like she should mention both those facts at that point, just to put Bond at ease.
But what's funny to me in that moment, they're getting in the seats. They haven't even put on the harness yet, and it's 3, 2, 1. They're just sort of nonchalantly, you know. There wasn't even a person standing close by that said, "Where the fuck you been?"
Yeah.
What's going on?
There was a point in the film where they come dangerously close to waving at Drax from the window of the Drax's shuttle, from the window of the shuttle. And I think what I thought, like, I noticed that for the first time this time. I was like, oh my God, do they see Drax? Does Drax see them from the window of his shuttle? Does he see the windscreen of their shuttle? And then when that didn't happen, I thought they should have done that. Like, that would have almost made that scene for me. That's what I mean. Like, if this was View to a Kill, they would have done it. They would have just been
see, the only problem with that was my next point, which was how much they're walking on and around this space station just without a single word being said to them.
Yeah. Well, they're both perfect specimens. Right.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, there's this thing where I think the filmmaker, I think, what's his name? Gilbert?
Lewis Gilbert. Yeah.
Lewis Gilbert. To me, it's like he's trying to make it seem as though there's so many people on this satellite that they can get kind of lost within the sea of humanity.
Unfortunately, he didn't tell Ken Adams that when he designed the space station.
But I mean, they're walking anywhere they want, including into a room that are only 2 guys. Now, if 2 people are supposed to walk into that room, I would assume those 2 people would know who they are.
Yeah, yeah.
But they even have moments where they're like,
in this room is doubled.
Hey, how you doing?
Yeah. The amount of people in the room is now doubled. It's affecting our gravity.
Yeah, right.
Our weight distribution. It's a big deal. Yeah, I mean, there's no thought to how this is different from being on a submarine or being on an oil rig.
Well, it feels very, you know, they at least give some play to gravity. I mean, twice, you know, you see the guy walk out.
Yeah.
Like,
that's right.
And now we got gravity. and then Bond turns it off, and all, you know, everything goes haywire, and they have to restore it. But it's one of those things where, as a viewer, you can imagine the people who are writing the movie talking in a room. Well, we have to at least address this, right?
We got to at least, the elephant in the room is gravity, okay?
Yeah.
But and
they just search for the easiest way out of it.
Well, also one of their solutions is for everyone to be moving at 75% speed.
Mm-hmm.
And they've kind of decided on.
I love it when the gravity goes out, like, and everyone is still walking on the ground, yeah, but just sort of.
But it's not significantly slower. It's just slightly slower.
Yeah.
And it's just interesting that, you know, I mean, when you do space in film, you're not actually doing what really happens in space. You've got to come up with something that addresses what space is like versus how we can show it on screen in a way that's satisfying for the viewer. It's just weird that they came up with, we're going like 10% slower than we normally do. It feels like, you know, then don't address it. Like, just go at normal speed if that is really the only accommodation you're going to be slightly slower when you point. You know, it's like it's not helping. But I mean, I agree that the space Marines is fascinating because I mean, again, even in a film that begins with Bond achieving the power of flight, we just abandon all semblance of reality there. It's just like, yeah, there's been a space Marine agency for I mean,
a good while now.
We've got to assume for a good 10, 15. Oh no, I mean to get that far into where it's like an organization that can get in a shuttle and go out and, you know, address any kind of space problem.
Right.
I mean, that's 50 years worth of 100 years worth of stuff, right?
Yeah.
If you saw that in Star Trek, you'd be like, I don't know if they'd be as organized. Well, I've seen the first few episodes of Star Trek Enterprise. They're not even that well organized then.
Even going further back into the movie when James Bond is with Q,
yeah,
and getting the look of Gadgets, and there's just some random guy with his laser, pew, 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 and he's melting a face, and there's no discussion of it. James Bond just looks over at it. That's interesting.
Yeah, they just goes.
Not that he actually says that. That's just the look on his face.
Yeah, they were like, well, that certainly looks like space to me. I don't quite know its practical application.
Right.
It melts this plastic model. I don't know what that tells us about what it does. But it's just you know, there is that sort of like so you get the sense someone who's seen 2001 but missed the point entirely, right? It's
completely
sort of like,
right.
When they're firing lasers at each, you know, when the Moonraker, Hugo Drex's you know, perfect specimen agents are firing the American Space Marines, and it's just lasers going at each other, and just like, what's happened? Like, I mean, I understand. That's why I think people think that that's some kind of like fall off in this film from. I mean, there is a fall off from reality in that last half hour, but the rest of it doesn't stand up either. But when you get to that point, like, what has happened? What literally has happened to this film, the story, to this franchise? At that point of them just firing lasers in and around each other.
Yeah, it's great.
I think, you know, they got nominated for visual effects, so let's say it worked.
Yeah. If we know anything, we know the Academy is never wrong.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. They never get it wrong. I always forget that it's Nazis in space as well. Because that's such a weird last minute addition to the plot that.
Because there's a moment where James Bond says, you know, you're going to do this and you're going to do that. And I guess replace it with the master race. And Drax says something like, whatever. Like,
yeah, no, I mean,
yeah, whatever you say.
His plan is Hitler's plan.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, they're related to Noah's Ark, but you know, I think that's just a eugenicist euphemism. You know, what's going on here is pure master race Lebensraum. And it just like, I don't know, it's like it's a weird thing to introduce 5 minutes before the end of the film,
right? Exactly.
As really and really only counts narratively as the justification for Jaws becoming an ally.
Yeah, an ally, right?
That seems to be entirely it. So maybe it was worth it. There's also, I mean, the only other thing I wanted to mention is the famous Mandela effect associated with this movie, that when people remember that when Jaws' love interest smiles for the first time, that she has braces. And many people expect to see it in the film. When it's not there, they can't wrap their heads around it.
They can't. They don't understand.
But I think that is where Mandela effect and missed writing opportunities kind of overlap. You know, sort of like that's the collision of the two. The Venn diagram of this is how it should have gone.
Yeah.
Versus I Mandela affected it into the film that it did happen. Because how no one on that set went, you know, it'd be kind of cool if she has metal teeth like Jaws. We can do that very easily. And she looks like the kind of girl who would have braces.
That would be no problem.
Yeah. And tonally would work in this film as well.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else about Moonraker, or can we move on to...
Let's just start at the beginning again and go scene by scene. And talk about each one.
Which I have done. I mean, I absolutely do that. I had this movie committed to memory at one point in order to do that live commentary. I suppose.
No, I mean, you know, we've talked about, I think, all the things I want to talk about. I just, you know, we were talking about another movie recently.
You and I.
Yeah, imagine that. But we were talking about Star Trek and a movie that gave us the warm and fuzzies.
Yes.
And this movie kind of gives me the warm and fuzzies. Like it just
it should give me the warm and fuzzies.
It scratches my James Bond itch in a way that clearly it does not for you.
No, it doesn't, and it absolutely. I guess I am the control experiment because of what kind of a film this really is, because there's so much nostalgia potential here. It's the first Bond movie I ever saw on TV.
Mm-hmm.
Roger Moore Bond films I associate with my childhood.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just, you know, I guess when you go back to it as an adult, and because you don't have to settle for it, there are other terrible Bond films out there that are just frankly more enjoyable. I suppose that's why. Like I just, you know, I could have been Moonraker, or I could have been A View to a Kill.
Right.
But the misguided project of A View to a Kill, I prefer to the misguided projects of Moonraker.
Well, now, why are you calling that a misguided project? Just because he's so old, or everything else in it?
Yeah, because he's so old. Well, I mean, you know, on macro level, it's something's not right about that film. Mm-hmm. Something's not working, but it's very enjoyable. You know, age is the huge thing, of course, that everyone talks about, and him looking distinctly uncomfortable at having to bed Grace Jones,
right?
All that sort of stuff. But I don't know. It ties together into something that's massively enjoyable, and this doesn't strike me the same way. So,
okay,
that's sorry to disappoint you.
No, you're all right.
Yeah. But look, anything else?
No, I not about that movie. I was wondering if we should we give it, before we move on to No Time to Die, should we give any discussion to what might be breaking James Bond news?
I don't know what that would be.
Well, there's rumors about the newest James Bond.
Okay, well, you will be breaking the news on me, so go for it.
Really? So I am hearing.
I might have seen something, but I've seen so many of those over the past year or two that I don't even look at them anymore.
Well, I had chosen to ignore this particular rumor until it resurfaced 2 or 3 times.
Oh.
And I'm hearing that Aaron Taylor Johnson of Marvel fame might be the new James Bond.
Okay. Who is that gentleman?
Exactly my points.
Do you know who he is, though?
He was the one that played WandaVision's brother.
Okay. None the wiser.
No.
And I have seen that.
Yeah, so that's how I felt.
I mean, listen, I have no problem with being someone who's not a recognizable face.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I think I'd prefer that at this point. I mean, sure, yeah. I don't think Bond films.
I guess for me, because I think he's probably, maybe he's in his 30s.
Okay.
Like, but if he is, it's early 30s. But he looks like he's 25, you know?
Well, that's good. I mean, you know, the rate they're making the films, they need someone young so that they can be old by the time they're done.
Yeah, I don't know, but I just
you can't start at like Roger Moore's age anymore.
No,
because unless they're cranking out one film every 2 years, which will never happen again.
Yeah, but I mean, I was perfectly okay. You know, we'll move on to No Time to Die now with this statement.
Well, yeah, I mean, I suppose the last thing I'd say is that I'm willing to accept anything at this point, because I don't want James Bond films to go on. I think this is the perfect point just to end it.
Oh, that's interesting.
I don't think there's any reason for the franchise to exist anymore beyond 25 films. I would like to see what they've said they're never going to do, which is some kind of spin-off property. But as far as the official canon goes, I just don't think I don't think the world needs any more Bond films.
All right.
Or Bond actors. I think that about most, if not all, franchises at this point.
Right.
Because
all they do is keep fucking them up. So why?
Well, that too. But I mean, you know, I've really come around on No Time to Die to the point where I actually think it's a pretty decent, all things considered, button on the franchise.
Mm-hmm.
And it might be worth, you know.
This is my other question for you.
Cutting your losses at this point.
This is my other question for you, because of the way No Time to Die ends. Yeah. If you're going to go on, don't you have to get rid of the Scooby Gang and Ralph Fiennes?
No. But well, not post Judi Dench being both Brosnan and Craig's.
I understand, like, historically what they've chosen to do in the past. But these characters watch James Bond die.
The actors
playing, because Bond, that whole Daniel
Craig is not as special as everyone thinks he is. He should be treated like every other Bond actor.
Okay, fine.
No. His timeline can be supplanted onto someone else's.
All right.
I really don't think it matters at all. I think they played fast and loose with the reality surrounding the.
I'm glad to hear you say that, because I kind of like the Scooby Gang as it is right now.
I don't know that they'll come back.
Yeah,
that's true. I think all of them have something else better to do. But I don't think Ralph Fiennes wants to do another one. I'm pretty sure he said that he's out with Craig. Yeah, no, I would be happy. I'd be fine for them to come back. I don't think they're necessary. I can't tell you the truth is I cannot imagine what a Bond film is from this point forward.
Interesting.
And it will depend on what they do in the first film of this new actor.
All right.
That's the only, even once the actor is selected, I still won't have a clue about what direction they're going in until that first film is out. I have no idea where they would go next, and I think that is the perfect signal to
Stop.
Yeah.
All right.
Let's do a TV series about Jeffrey Wright's Felix Leiter or something. Something.
Yeah. Right.
But that's the broccoli. It's kind of interesting. Like the more time goes on, the more I think that the Michael G. Wilson and Barbara Broccoli are their thinking is stuck in an era that simply doesn't exist to filmmaking anymore. Like I think they still think they can get Bond films out faster than they can.
Yeah.
And I think they're going to get left behind at some point if they don't make certain adjustments to how filmmaking works. I don't know what is going on with their relationship with Amazon. That seems like
I had to pay to watch Moonraker again.
So did I.
They took it off again.
I lost because I lost my DVD. This is true. And I know that I lost
so much. You're careless with what you had.
Yeah, I think she threw it out the window. No, and I know it's and it
I'll never need you again, Moonraker.
No, honestly, after I watched it, 4 or 5 times in preparation for a live commentary, I probably did something akin to throwing it out of the window. I was probably like, you know what? I aren't even putting it back in its box.
Yeah, right.
It's probably I looked through all my other DVDs, I couldn't find it, so God knows where it ended up. But there you go.
All right.
Yeah, but let's move on to No Time to Die. We've covered this before,
right?
Just over a year ago. I've now seen it 3 times. You've seen it 2 times. I see twice in the cinema, once on streaming. You're 1 and 1.
Mm-hmm.
You were already quite enamored with it. It's fair to say. Is that fair? Is that a fair statement? And I think I don't. Well, I might have alluded to this. I had lots of problems with it the first time I saw it, which is when we did our reaction. Time to digest. And I saw it about a month later and found a lot more to like, but was still on the fence about a number of aspects of it. And now I've seen it a 3rd time, and here's where I'm at after the third and no, not final viewing, but final.
Yeah. Come on. Who are you kidding?
The worst I can say about it at this point is that I think it is a desperately unfocused film. It feels like looking at it from with the overview that I have of 3D.
Actually, on this viewing, I might agree with you.
It feels like multiple films grafted onto one. Alternate drafts of what this story is being stitched together. The storytelling is at times confusing, incoherent, and indulgent. But you know what? What I'll also say is that the pendulum swung in the other direction. I actually think most everything that's on screen is a success. Most of the action punches, the characterizations work on the whole, jokes land, the music's solid. Apart from a terrible theme song and a villain that doesn't really work, I don't really have any complaints with anything that's on screen.
All right.
So yeah, that's where I'm at. I think it's a good 3 or 4 movies worth of content that they haven't found a way to narrow down into one film.
Yeah, right.
What are your thoughts?
I still think this is a very good movie. There are aspects of it that lessened for me a little bit on a second viewing.
Oh, what were those?
Well, kind of what you were just saying. It does feel like there are disparate things that were stitched together.
Yeah.
And most specifically, I think I'm trying to remember what I had to say about Rami Malek.
You were down on him.
Was I? I thought maybe I was a little more up. I thought I was saying something.
Well, you were defending.
It's good to see another sort of delicious Bond villain in vein of a Drax, and he's not that at all.
No.
So if I was saying that, then I realized I'm definitely
I remember you were more convinced by his plan than I was.
Okay.
So I hope you're less convinced of his plan having seen it a second time.
There are aspects of it that I really liked and aspects of it that I don't like as much.
I cannot make the leap from his motivation to his plan. Mm-hmm. I cannot make that leap. That's where I'm out. That's where I think this is two different movies that cannot come together.
Yeah, I'll agree.
Yeah.
The part of it that I like, though, is that idea of, because there's a moment where James Bond, where Craig says, just get this shit out of me, get this stuff off me. And Q has to say, no, it's there forever.
Yeah.
And so the idea of, and of course, the payoff at the end is, I can't go anywhere near my wife and kid.
I still don't understand why he can't go near Madeline, but definitely the kid.
Well, I agree with you, but I think it just has to do with
the kid.
The kid, yeah.
Send her off to boarding school. Get a Zoom Pro account. We've done it.
It's a very British thing to do.
Yeah, we had no choice. Send him off to. He went to Eton, I think.
But in terms of like you were saying, the characterization and them as a family unit. Him realizing that he has a daughter, and in a very short span of actual film time, they build quite a bit within that for me.
Yeah, I mean, they bungle aspects of it. The whole there's absolutely no reason for him to not think that it's not his kid. Like, I don't understand what the writers were thinking.
But you were the one pushing that last time.
Well, yeah, that's what I mean. Like, why you would have a line saying,
I think you were saying last time, why would he think it was his kid? I was like, what are you talking about?
No. Absolutely no. I'm saying the opposite. That we know it, and then we have the writers want us to think that. I don't know what they want us to think. I just think it's bungled. But yeah, I mean, in spite of that, it's kind of it works anyway. That is surprising that aspect of the reveal that he has a daughter is what doesn't work. There's so much around it that doesn't.
I literally think they were just going for the joke.
Well, then that's stupid.
All right.
That's a waste of a line. And it does something. I don't know. But it's a compromising joke. It's not a joke that adds. It's not a Star Trek 4 Voyage Home type joke.
No, very few are.
It's a Star Trek 5 The Final Frontier joke. To put it in terms that either of us.
It's just the blue eyes joke. That's it.
I don't know. Well, but I think this is the thing. Like, I one of the things that my criticisms have become more holistic.
Mm-hmm.
So, I was over focusing on the cold open.
I was gonna say, what didn't bother me at all? Cold open.
Well, it never really did.
No,
and it still bothers me. But then I think, and then now I've seen the rest of the movie. I'm like, oh, that's what the whole movie's like. It cannot decide when to end a scene and when to just cut its losses and say, that's a good enough scene, and if we keep it going, it might ruin something for the next bit. Like, the movie doesn't have that impulse. I'm like, okay, those are the terms on which the whole movie exists. Let's just enjoy it for what it is. And I'm able to do that now. It's hard for me to sort of, I do think it's weird to me that people haven't come out and gone, isn't this the most set PC Bond film ever? Like, as much as Moonraker. But I don't have necessarily a problem with that aspect of Moonraker. I think that's just, there's 5-6 too many set pieces, as there are in this film. But it's interesting that people don't,
right,
just because it's Daniel Craig and because it's Phoebe Waller-Bridge, and
yeah,
but it's the same thing. Anyway.
I will say this in terms of the cold open. I'll throw you this bone on this viewing. I did keep thinking, how much do we need that first scene?
Which one?
The first one. The flashback. Wow,
that's
to Madeline.
I mean, that's my frustrations are partly from the fact that I think that would have been one of the best ever Bond cold opens if they decided to cut it on the ice.
Mm-hmm. That's the thing, though, is that the scene itself as filmed, I think, is great, but it also is referencing something we already know, which I only know because of the movies we watched preceding it, and remembering the thing about the sink and like that, because she talks about it.
She does, but we don't. I'm fine with and I can't believe I'm saying this, but I'm fine with recapping that because it plays out in a way different from what you expect from what she says, I think.
Okay. But the other thing that I think is weak in the movie is you don't get a real sense of her relationship to Rami Malek. You don't get what's going on between them. No. All of that feels underplayed.
Yeah, and I do wonder. I mean, it's something that I've heard talked about that it didn't strike me at the time, but now I can't unsee it when I watch the first 10th of the cold open, which is that Rami Malek and the ice and with the scary mask. It's pure slasher. It's pure like Halloween, OG Michael Myers, and like Bond films. Obviously, Moonraker shows what happens if you draw too much on something that is not Bond. Like if you overplay that hand, it can go disastrously. But a little bit of let's slap another genre on Bond can also work really well. You've seen License to Kill. And so it would have been it would have just sold the movie much better if it was like, let's turn this cold open into a slasher movie.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why everything after it that comes before the titles just eats away at that effect for me.
Okay.
And that's why I feel like it should have blown my mind. And I look at it and think, technically, it's so brilliant. And Cary Fukunaga is such a great horror director. You only watch the first season of True Detective to figure that out.
Right.
But this is, it's not just slasher. It's really good. It's like the beginning of a really good slasher movie. And that's what really struck me on this viewing. And, that's kind of woven through the movie in a way that's actually quite productive. There's a lot of body horror in there. We get the poisonings, all the kind of gross faces and melting, and then the coup de grace, the eye exploding, and also that sequence in the woods, which is incredibly gothic, almost as much as that scene in Moonraker with the mist, and it looks like they're in the quiet place.
Yeah.
And it makes me think like, having like a director who's really good at horror is a really nice layering for this.
I like that scene more this time than I did the first time. because I think last time I said it was too long and I would have cut it, but it builds some mood in some ways that I really like. And I really like when he kills the guy who killed Felix.
Yeah. And so I sort of, I thought more about this as a horror film, in the same way Live and Let Die is like a blaxploitation Bond film. It's like, is this a horror Bond film?
Yeah.
And I think that's there. I wouldn't necessarily want it to be more of that, but at the same time, I do wonder whether it's like people coming in and saying, okay, you can do Fukunaga, you can do your own thing with this scene, but then we've got to have like a regular Bond scene. It's like, yeah, but it'll disrupt the narrative flow. I don't care. It's got to be in there. I wonder how much that's going on. Like the constant battle between, they already fired one director who had too many of his own ideas about what he wanted to do.
Right.
But it's also it's amazing that so much of that true detective
did come through.
Comes through in the film, and I think it's just enough and just right. But at times, I think they step on the rest of the film. Kind of steps on that, which is again, it's just a structural thing. It's just like sometimes you can end a scene, and you lose nothing.
Yeah.
But I really get a sense that this film has been rewritten several times. By several different people over and over again, to the point where it's what belongs to what draft.
Right. It's almost getting hard to know how much you can blame a movie because of how Hollywood works right now.
Yeah.
Because what you're describing is just how Hollywood works right now.
Sure.
And
clearly, and then it's how Hollywood works. It's also, the broccoli machine doesn't lend itself to people coming in and doing their own thing. So you have to have, it has to be a kind of accommodation of both. So those two things work, but and I think that's why the film feels as bloated as it does at times. But I'm kind of struck by the high quality of what we do see when we see it.
Yeah.
And also something that, I don't think I gave this film enough credit, really. In fact, probably the opposite.
I'll say.
No, it's specifically in terms of like, it's not a perfect rendition of camp, but it's a lot. But they, like, in the final Daniel Craig movie, they discovered how to do camp James Bond. And this was what
do you mean, like, with the jokes, or
there's a kind of
quips.
Well, this is the thing, it's such a fine balance, and it's such an art form. If you think about, it's like the difference between Bride of Chucky and Seed of Chucky, or Bride of Frankenstein and Van Helsing. One is successfully doing camp. The other one is just self-parody. It's kind of like, it can very easily descend into that. And I think the Daniel Craig films have always taken themselves too seriously. And they need to, and somehow it's all come together in this film tonally, their ability to still treat the material seriously, but also heighten comedically and parodically and kitsch to what's going on. Like the idea that the stuff like the bionic eye, and the nanobots, and there's like a mad scientist in this.
Yeah, right.
Whose performance, I don't know, it just gets better and better every time I see it. I thought he was a waste of time in the first time I saw it, but now he's a real pleasure of that film. It's for some reason, it's one of those performances you're like, is this guy really good at this or really bad at this? And by the third viewing, I'm like, he's really good at this.
He's good at it, yeah.
And I forgot he's in Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy.
Right.
He's like a really good character actor. and I didn't see it as a character actor performance, and now I just thought it was pure Jar Jar. But it is kind of, it still is. But it works in a way I didn't think so before. And You know, and the characterization of Q and the way he's kind of factored into these films to give a certain camp commentary to what's going on. And yeah, I think
teapots.
Yeah, and none of it detracts from the emotional core of the film.
No, in fact, I really like the moment when he doesn't realize what James is saying about getting his wife on the line. And Bond just says, Q. And then it dawns on him what's happening.
Yeah.
And he, kind of does this thing.
It's the thing is, it's like, it's what we're...
There are little moments like that in this movie that I really like.
Yeah, I think little moments of the thing, and it's something that we're traditionally quite good at in Britain, is this sort of slight, it's just a slight whoops kind of effect. It's like there's even a moment in this film where Q pulls out the wrong drawer and it's got a tea set in it. Yeah. And he goes, whoops, and puts it back in. And it's like, yeah, sometimes that's all it takes. Like, and the Bond films, in the 70s were very good at pulling off. The Spy Who Loved Me pulls off the same thing of Moonraker. That's one of the reasons Moonraker doesn't, is it goes too far in the other direction. So I'm glad that they've been able to reintroduce that, and they were never able to sort of do the kind of character arc that I always thought they should have done with Daniel Craig, and we talked about in the last episode, and like turning him into what feels like a familiar Roger Moore type Bond, which I think he should have been at the end. But tonally, I think they were definitely getting there. And I'm kind of surprised that they were able to pull it off so late in the game with all the problems they had making this film.
Yeah.
And I think it also shows the difference between the people making this film and Spectre.
Yeah.
Because clearly they were going for that feel sometimes in Spectre, but they didn't. And maybe this is where Phoebe Waller-Bridge comes in. But again, I don't understand why Jez Butterworth wouldn't bring it either. Is that, you're actually able to just tinker with the material enough to give it that camp edge that's very satisfying. But it also doesn't compromise it as a serious movie. Rather than it just be, Spectre is like an overly serious film plus lots of bad jokes. And somehow they've tinkered with the formula here in a way that the campness comes out, because it doesn't go too far in either direction. I don't think I give it enough credit for that.
Glad to see you coming around a little bit.
Yeah, and
ever so slightly.
I'm with you. Like we like it's how much do you resist every big Hollywood film you're seeing being bloated in some fashion? Because you're right, it's not atypical. So why would the Bond films be any different?
Yeah, right.
But it's hard to take, because you don't need it in any franchise film, but you really don't need it in a Bond film. Like, you really don't need there to be too much content. There's like content is never the problem. The amount of content is never the problem. You can get by on the bare bones in a Bond film of content. I always think. And still do something fun. So why push yourselves in weird directions to try and make stories happen that you don't even need to be in the film? But yeah, I mean,
you don't need to turn Asians into white men. I think is what you're saying.
A good general rule for life. And yeah, obviously, also, I think even at the time I thought, well, even if I don't like it, it's a very good testament film for Daniel Craig.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah.
And having both him and Leiter dying is a very good indication of, sort of taking his timeline to a kind of organic endpoint. But I think this is even more of a kind of testament Bond film, and this is kind of why I think it would be great if this was the last ever Bond film, because it wraps up everything since Connery left. The film's got an On Her Majesty's Secret Service fetish.
Right.
There's a ton. Every time I notice more references to the Dalton era. for some reason. I mean, he's driving around in Timothy Dalton's Aston Martin.
Yeah, right.
Moneypenny is dressed as the Dalton Moneypenny. We only see Robert Brown on the wall in that one.
Right.
We do see Judi Dench another time. And I just, it's like there's View to a Kill references, obviously the Jamaica stuff as well. I just feel I feel I've Live and Let Die. I just sort of feel like, God, this is such a nice button in so many ways. Like in a way that Skyfall and Die Another Day, when they did like anniversary films that were supposed to do that job, really didn't. Like like just like felt really labored. But here it doesn't feel labored, but there's a lot of, the film ends with we have all the time in the world. Again, Hans Zimmer this is remarkable that he goes against the way he normally does scores simply because this is a Bond film, and he's like, I'm not gonna tinker about with a Bond film with my own auteur
shenanigans
style. Yeah, it's like, look at the music we have to play with. I think that's brilliant. Best decision he's ever made as a composer. As well as hiring Johnny Marr, I suppose, as his guitarist. So yeah, I sort of think, this I don't know if you thought that there was anything. I guess the question is there anything in this film that makes you want to see another Bond film?
I think it's funny because I was surprised and then not surprised to hear you say, yeah, I think we should just stop it.
Yeah.
Because to me, it's just a foregone conclusion that, of course, it's not going to stop. So I never gave any thought as to whether or not it should go on.
Yeah.
But because of the things that this movie chooses to do, it does seem to wrap up the series for me in a very satisfying way.
Yeah, I mean, they're either going to have to walk back everything they've done in this film or reset, right? I mean, that's the
right. If like the first scene, I don't know, if the first scene in a new James Bond movie is a body landing in the water and seems unconscious and then wakes up, I think I'll be upset.
And forgets he ever had a daughter.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, because he's got amnesia. By the way, this happens at the end of You Only Live Twice.
Right. Yes.
At the book, the literary version of it. So
yeah,
they can adapt that if they want. He goes off, and then
I thought you'd said that before.
Yeah, he does. Yeah, he gets.
Or maybe that was off mic. I don't remember.
No, I think I said it on. Yeah, he gets amnesia in that part of the world as well, because there's the Poison Garden is from Only Live Twice, the book. And then fascinatingly, he gets he thinks he's Russian because he recognizes the words Vladivostok, so he thinks he's from Russia, and he hands himself over to the Russians, and the KGB turn him into a double agent. Fantastic.
Love it.
Probably not going to do that though now.
Yeah, I was just going to say, why don't we get a story like that?
Yeah, they hand him into Putin, and he gets and then he goes and tries to kill M.
Oh, that's good stuff.
I mean, it's great. That's
James Bond having to become James Bond again.
Well, that's it. The book, Man with the Golden Gun, the first chapter is Bond returning to London, presumed dead, walking into M's office and trying to assassinate him. Doesn't that sound amazing?
Love it.
You imagine that would be the best thing to start the new series with.
Cold open.
Yeah, and then they have to brainwash him and basically we've got to turn him into a new man. And then that's how you bring your new actor in.
It's great.
You kind of Doctor Who it a little bit. That's all. Is there anything else you wanted to say about No Time to Die?
No. I think, we've talked about it so much, but on a second viewing, it still holds up for me. I mean, I really like that movie.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like if I kept watching it as with the regularity that I have been watching it, I might get more irritated at some of the incoherence of the storytelling. But at this point, I'm in a sweet spot where I'm able to ignore that
Give it a
part.
year.
Yeah.
You know, back away from it for a bit.
Back away from it for a while, and it's good to see any kind of modern franchise film that's well directed and where you're looking at everything on screen and going, "Oh, it looks really good."
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's a low bar, but still. So I have a few sort of wrap up items here.
Go
to finish. We've looked at 7. No, 8. 8, yes, 8 Bond films that could be considered continuing sequels. Are there any for you? Are there any common denominators of these films versus the rest of the canon? Is there anything about the films that specifically the Bond films we've watched, that seem different from the rest of the canon?
Oh, I don't know, Tom. You're probably the better man to answer that question.
Well, it struck me that in some senses they're all outliers and experiments.
Mm-hmm.
On screen, there's a lot of going rogue. I think in each of these movies at some point.
Well, we took a lot of the Daniel Craig movies, so of course there's lots of going rogue.
But we've also License to Kill, he goes rogue.
Yeah.
Majesty's Secret Service. I don't know if you could say he goes rogue in From Russia with Love.
You can almost say it. You could say he goes rogue with permission in Moonraker.
Yeah. Also in For Your Eyes Only.
All right, so all of them.
Well, yeah. I mean, From Russia with Love, maybe not. That might be. And also that they seem to have a greater emotional resonance than other Bond films.
Mm.
And again, that might be skewed by the Craig sample.
Right.
But even in, From Russia with Love, I mean, it's not Bond's emotionality, but between Tatiana and Donovan Grant, it's an emotionally charged movie.
Especially Grant, man.
Yeah. For Your Eyes Only is bizarrely. Well, I guess bizarrely because it comes after Moonraker. It's so centered on emotion.
Mm-hmm.
License to Kill as well. No Time to Die, the most of all of them. So Quantum of Solace, because without emotion, there's no story to Quantum of Solace, really, is it? It's an emotional reaction that turned into a 90-minute movie. And I presume with Spectre, we're supposed to think that. I don't know. I don't know what we're supposed to think, but there's emotion. Well, that's when he meets Madeline Swan and he falls in love. So
and he does, yeah, right.
We're told. Well, I mean, is there anything else that's distinguishes these films that we've looked at?
I mean, I'm trying to think back on them. It was an interesting point you came up with about the outlier.
Yeah.
Idea.
Not normal run-of-the-mill James Bond.
Right.
Except From Russia with Love, I suppose, is the exception.
Mm-hmm.
But even that, in its moment, challenges what Dr. No established a little bit.
Yeah. There's you have some connection within the idea of revenge.
Yeah. No, you're right. You're dead right.
There's a lot in there to play with most of these movies, I think.
Hell of a lot of revenge. Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially compared to
from License to Kill all the way through all of Daniel Craig's. It's almost as though the killing of Vesper kind of fuels some sort of revenge throughout the rest of the movies.
That's true. Absolutely. Yeah. I love that. Yeah, revenge definitely appears more often than not in these films as a motivating factor, and that doesn't really apply to to other mission-based films so much.
Yeah. I mean, even For Your Eyes Only starts with kind of a revenge killing, just to get rid of.
Well, they talk about, and they talk about revenge. Bond quotes the old Chinese saying, "When taking revenge, dig 2 graves." Mm-hmm. So it's a discussion of revenge, and we talked about how the shadow of On Her Majesty's Secret Service is kind of, is kind of there, of like, why doesn't Bond? Well, I say, why doesn't Bond go after Blofeld? He does. He throws him down a chimney.
Yeah, exactly.
Throws him into a nuclear furnace. So that the film begins with an act of revenge. I love that. I think that's great. So
anything for you?
No. Again, just those. I think revenge is
okay.
Revenge, emotional resonance, going rogue, and being some kind of an outlier experiment.
All
right. Let's do what we always do and rank and declare good or bad for these 8 movies.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're gonna have to remind me which one. What do we got?
On Her Majesty's Secret Service.
Right.
I've only got it listed on my in order, so I'm gonna try and do it from memory. On Her Majesty's Secret Service, we then did. What was next? Sorry.
Did we Russia to Russia? Didn't we do Russia next?
No.
No.
So I think it was On Your Majesty's Secret Service. License to Kill.
For Your Eyes Only.
For Your Eyes Only. Well, in whatever order we did it in here, From Russia with Love, Quantum of Solace, Moonraker, and Spectre. No Time to Die.
From Russia with Love.
Number 1.
License to Kill. No, I'm just trying to remember for myself. Moonraker. And then Quantum.
Mm-hmm.
Spectre. Mm-hmm. No Time to Die.
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
Yeah. If that's 8, then yes.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All right.
Okay.
I got them.
Okay.
All right. How do you want to do this?
Can you rank them now, or do you need me to? Should we go one?
Let's go 1-1.
Okay. On Her Majesty's Secret Service. No big surprise there. My number 1.
That's my top 2.
What's your? But not your number 1.
No, it is my number 1.
Oh, it's your number 1. Oh, your top 2. I thought you said it's in your top 2. Wow.
Yeah.
That is that's surprising.
Oh no, wait.
That's the Lazenby one.
It's
the one with the Australian, Mike. The Australian one.
I'm wrong.
I thought that.
It was just at the top of the list that I wrote.
Yeah, I know.
I'm an idiot. No, the top of my list is For Your Eyes Only.
Really?
Yeah.
That's a surprise too.
Yeah.
Better than From Russia with Love?
Slightly.
Which would be a number 2.
Yeah.
Well, For Your Eyes Only is my number 2.
Okay. And the reason for me is that I think we talked about it, From Russia with Love. It gets a little repetitive towards the end.
That's my beef with it, yeah.
So for me, For Your Eyes Only.
Yeah, that's exactly why it makes, For Your Eyes Only is at the edge of my top 5 all-time Bond films, and From Russia with Love is right there next to it, and it really is that third act that does it, which is strange because there are some problems with For Your Eyes Only, but they're a bit more dispersed.
Okay.
Okay, so yeah, From Russia with Love is my 3rd. What's your number 3?
Struggling. I think I want to say No Time to Die.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and I think I officially will say No Time to Die.
I had a this is where it got hard for me. Although for most people it would get hard putting From Russia with Love outside the top two.
Right.
Not for me, but it was between No Time to Die and License to Kill.
It's the same for me, actually.
And I've had they could change. I feel like they could change play. I mean, it's that's retrospective. No Time to Die. I wouldn't have said that a year ago. It wouldn't have been anywhere near.
Yeah, right.
I think I'm still gonna go License to Kill.
All right.
But very like razor thin.
Mm-hmm.
No Time to Die after. I'm not quite there. I don't want to push it with No Time to Die, but I'm not quite at the point where I think it's a better achievement than License to Kill. Again, for most people, this is not a problem. This is famously despised Bond film, but I think.
Well, and it was despised by me.
You changed my mind on it. You changed
What's that?
my mind on it. You convinced me this was a better movie than even I thought.
Well, and I think you convinced me about License to Kill.
No, I'm talking about License to Kill.
Oh, okay.
I remember when it came to License to Kill, it's like I feel like whatever anyone says to me about License to Kill, I have to agree. If someone's like, this is secretly one of the best Bond films, I'll be like, yeah, it is, and they'd be like, this really doesn't work. I'm like, no, you're right, it does.
Yeah, you're probably right. Because it was a movie I really did not like the first time I saw it, and had subsequently not watched it a lot. And going back and watching it with you, I think I probably said like it was a delight to go back to that movie.
Well, you also said something really interesting, which was that it made a real impression on me because I still remember it. He said you don't lose anything you would normally get in a Bond film just because they're doing it differently.
Yeah.
So there's got to be a high premium on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's funny. I was looking at the list and saw License to Kill, and then at the bottom of the list, No Time to Die. And in my heart, I went, ooh, what do I choose? But I do think that, we were talking about visual style and sort of what No Time to Die kind of, brought to the table. And in that way, I think it's a better made film. And it gave me the edge slightly.
I can't argue with that.
I'm going.
Ask me in a year. Ask me in a year.
No Time to Die to License to Kill.
Yeah.
And then I'll throw you a bone. After that, I'll say On Her Majesty's Secret Service.
Oh, wow. That's low. That's not throwing me a bone.
It is for me.
I think that's the best Bond film of all time.
I know, but you're wrong.
Okay.
Although I had a good chuckle over the Thanksgiving holiday. They were re-showing, they were showing all the West Wing episodes. And so I was catching some here and there over the weekend.
Yeah.
And one of them, I think the episode's called Shaken Not Stirred. And Charlie was looking forward to getting a tax return back, and he was so happy that he was going to buy On Her Majesty's Secret Service. That was the Bond movie he was going to buy. I was delighted by that when I rewatched that.
He was gifted it by Bartlett because of all the charitable donations,
along with Yeoman of the Guard.
Well, next on my list is Quantum of Solace.
Okay.
Because that's where it goes in the list. No, I mean, at this point, it's about what it beats, which is, for me, Spectre and Moonraker.
And so this is where this is my biggest struggle.
And I used to like this movie a lot more than I did before we talked about it.
Quantum?
I'm a little bit down on it at the moment. It might be temporary, but I'm a little bit down on it.
Yeah. See, I'm a little up on it.
Yeah, I know.
And much to your chagrin, I'm finding it difficult to put it above Moonraker.
I understand that. I mean, they're polar opposites, right?
Yeah.
I Moonraker is a more comprehensible Bond movie than Quantum of Solace, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm. But Quantum is probably a better made movie, which was the argument I just made for the previous two movies.
There's only a certain number of arguments you can make at this point.
And yet I think I'm going to say Moonraker followed by Quantum, which of course...
I think a lot of Bond fans would agree with you.
All right. Which of course puts Spectre right where it belongs.
At the dead bottom. You know what? I didn't see that coming.
No.
I thought you hated
Quantum more?
Quantum more than Spectre, yeah.
Not after this viewing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, technically, if you take Moonraker out of the list, which is, my all-time bottom. So it's all, I mean, I like that even less than I like Skyfall. The Spectre is above it, but Spectre.
I love how much you hate Skyfall when everybody likes that movie.
Yeah. But Spectre is kind of at the bottom for me as well. I mean, it's second bottom, second only to the worst Bond film ever made. I mean, it's we could only pick out a handful of moments really that worked in the whole film, and that tells you everything, I think.
I agree.
So let's so you've got Spectre dead bottom, I've got Moonraker. Let's good bad these babies.
All right. Well, let's just, how many bads do you have?
That's the best way of doing it. I have 2 bads and 1 borderline.
I have 1 bad and 2 borderlines.
Oh, okay. What are your definitive bads?
Spectre.
Wow. God, I really didn't see this coming. That is also one of my definitive bads, yes.
Okay.
The other one for me is Moonraker.
I'm on the fence. Along with Quantum.
Borderlines. And,
my borderlines.
Okay, we have this. So we have the same. We.
I figured we'd have the same 3.
We have the same 3 with the line.
I'm going to call everything else a good movie.
Yeah, Quantum of Solace is my only borderline. I feel like it's fading fast in my appreciation.
And for me, I mean, a year ago, I would have definitively said bad.
All right. Well, one of my
for some reason, I think I'm going to give Moonraker a break.
Yeah.
I'm going to for no definitive reason whatsoever.
Yeah, I'll tell you what the reason is. Spite. And that's fine. It's a perfect reason.
I had so much fun.
Not a good reason to return an item of clothing, as per Seinfeld, but a great reason to... Yeah.
I had so much fun watching Moonraker.
I ranked the Harry Potters just to spite you.
That's true.
After you said they were all good, I was like, well, fuck the borderline ones. Half-Blood Prince, fuck you.
You said I was going to say this is a good movie. Now go fuck yourself.
No. If that's the level we're working at, I'll be simplistic too.
Yeah,
and all the rest of them are good for me.
Quantum.
Oh, we have to. Yeah, I suppose we have to decide either way. Oh, bad.
Just to make it fun, I'll say good.
Well, that's the trajectories we're going in.
Yeah.
It's when we talked about it,
I'm wrong. It's not a good movie.
You can say bad.
Yeah, I think it's bad.
Yeah. I think in the end, all I'm going to say is, in spite of I think it's a good salvage job, but not a good movie.
Okay.
They salvaged the film out of dire circumstances, but they did not make a good movie.
All right.
And then the rest, yes, good. At least 3.
Sure, to me, yeah.
At least, and the top 3, On Her Majesty's Secret Service, For Your Eyes Only, From Russia with Love. Great movies for me.
I'll say 2 great movies.
And then License to Kill, No Time to Die, kind of middling.
Yeah, no, I'll say good. I think, yeah.
Yeah, they're both good, but middling good.
But not great.
Good with problems.
Yeah.
I don't think these
Yeah.
my top.
I mean, what a year it's been.
Yeah, quite a project.
Mm-hmm.
Really glad to have taken that journey for you, and a great way to make do something specific about the Bond films without necessarily, having to do 25 Bond films in a row. I think we did it.
Which we should do.
I don't think so. It's just it's a lot.
Everything after Dr. No.
I think we should do Never Say Never Again, but I don't know how that would work.
Watch along.
Yeah, I guess we could. Watch along. When it becomes free.
Someday.
So it's never going to become free. None of these films are ever free.
I was so pissed that Prime took them back off.
The Broccolis are holding on to a model that is simply not the way we watch movies anymore.
Yeah.
I think that's gonna bite them in the ass. Like so many rubber snakes in a rainforest pool. How bad does that fucking snake look? When he puts
yeah, but there are moments where I think there's a real snake too.
Roger Moore isn't in there with him.
No,
he isn't anywhere.
Absolutely not.
That's one of the reasons that I love A View to a Kill. Like as soon as anyone starts moving above like 3 miles an hour, it's like, oh, that's not Roger Moore anymore.
Right. Oh, I could watch that movie. I might watch it right now.
Yeah, you should. Especially, yeah. Well, you'll see. Hopefully, you will do it back to back with Moonraker. You'll see that there's a huge difference in the artfulness of bad movie making.
Well, it helps when you have Christopher Walken
and Grace Jones.
Yeah,
and Patrick McGowan. Is it Patrick McGowan? No, Patrick McNee as his younger sidekick.
Nice.
There's a great.
All right, sir.
There's a great story. Just to, not that we're talking about A View to a Kill. The writer and actor Mark Gatiss did a documentary about James Bond films, and he really liked View to a Kill, but finds it very hard to justify that point of view. And he remembers going to see it at the movie theater with his father. And at the point at which Roger Moore and Patrick McNee are breaking into Drax's underground laboratory beneath the stables, wearing clothes that are 20 years too young for them, his dad leaned over to him and said, "If the British Secret Service are left in these guys' hands, we're in trouble."
That's fantastic.
Yep. But that's it for Everything or Nothing sequel. Watch this, well, not literally this space, but watch some kind of space that we're in.
Right.
Some kind of broadcast space. For news of what's next. I think you'll be happy with the direction we're going in. We'll say no more.
I agree. with everything you just said.
Stiff upper lip. Okay. Well,
thank you one and all for participating in our little James Bond experiment and watch-alongs here. Not watch-alongs, but chats.
Video mini series.
Treeside chats.
It's fun. People watch this and
how we started. Or well, no, I guess not.
By. Yeah, I remember that
Close
tree.
To it.
That tree in your background, and I got my little Christmas decorations added to the.
Love it.
Yeah.
All right, sir.
Okay. James Bond will not return, but something else will.
For now.